Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're completely stripping away those glossy Hollywood myths to get down to the gritty, relentless realities of human survival across 4 totally different eras. You know, history isn't always pretty, but honestly, the absolute truth of how our ancestors actually endured, well, it's deeply, deeply fascinating. Let's get right into it. So, let's kick things off with a question that's going to shatter that whole fairy tale illusion right out of the gate. Seriously, would you survive a single day in the Middle Ages? I mean, forget the gallant knights and those grand roaring feasts. We are talking about the brutal, everyday existence that the vast majority of regular people actually faced. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First up, the medieval survival test. Second, the rise of Catherine. Third, we'll look at Palenque's Red Queen mystery. And fourth, Frida Kahlo's defiant art. All right, part 1, the medieval survival test. Gritty reality over Hollywood myths. Picture this. It's a freezing cold morning in the year 1325. Now, you aren't waking up in a glamorous stone castle. No way. You are waking up in a cramped, one-room wooden hut, lying on a half-rotted straw mattress that is literally crawling with bugs. You step outside, and your street, it's basically an open sewer. Your entire daily life is just this continuous, exhausting loop of brutal labor, all just to avoid starvation. And your diet? Well, it's a pretty grim negotiation with starvation. Breakfast is weak ale. Yes, even for the kids. Why? Because drinking the water would quietly murder you with deadly parasites. Dinner is this gloopy pottage that's been simmering away for days. And get this, sometimes it was bulked up with actual sawdust just to make it stretch further. As for flavor, forget about it. Zero spices, things like salt and pepper were basically locked away, strictly for the ultra-rich. And whatever you do, avoid the doctor at all costs. Medical treatments back then were essentially just polite torture, based on absolutely zero understanding of germs. They believed your health was governed by this weird imbalance of the 4 humors. So if you had a fever, the local barber surgeon, and yes, I literally mean the exact same guy who cuts your hair, would just drain your blood using hungry leeches or some dull blade. Got a toothache? He's pulling that bad boy out with rusty pliers, by candlelight, with zero anesthesia. And honestly, a simple infection from that so-called cure could easily be the end of you. Okay, so having firmly established that baseline of medieval suffering, let's pivot. We're heading to the treacherous, glittering courts of 18th century Russia to look at a woman who navigated a completely different kind of brutal reality just to seize absolute power. Section 2. The Rise of Catherine. From obscure princess to autocrat. You have to consider the absolute breathtaking political survival of this young German girl named Sophie. She arrives in a freezing Russian capital as a mere political pawn at just 14 years old. But she masters this paranoid viper's nest of a royal court. She's married off to a man who literally despises her, but she doesn't just survive. In 1762, she launches this brilliant, bloodless coup to completely overthrow her own husband. From there, she crushes massive internal threats, like the Pugachev Rebellion, and by the time she dies in 1796, she has fundamentally rewritten the map of Europe. The truly crucial point here is her wild, dual nature. I mean, on one hand, she's corresponding with Enlightenment philosophers, but on the other, she is ruling with an absolute iron fist, expanding the Russian Empire by over 200,000 square miles. She's out there publicly debating reason and legal reform with Voltaire, but privately, she fully maintains the brutal system of serfdom just to keep... Now, leaving that grand empire of Russia behind, let's travel deep, deep into the ancient Mesoamerican jungle of Palenque. We're transitioning from a well-documented royal court to an ancient silent mystery that completely redefines how we view female power in the Maya world. Which brings us to Section 3, Palenque's Red Queen Mystery, a silent Maya legacy. So picture this, it's 1994, and archaeologists finally open a sealed sarcophagus hidden inside Temple 13. What they find is an elite woman covered entirely in this shocking, brilliant red powder. This stuff is called cinnabar, and it is a highly toxic mercury sulfide powder. But to the Maya, this incredibly dangerous substance was profoundly sacred. It symbolized blood, sacrifice, and this vital life force. It marked her body for actual deification, not just death, turning her burial into this elaborate spiritual transition connecting the human and divine realms. This wasn't just a simple burial. It was an intense, deliberate, step-by-step spiritual preparation. They had to transition her into the treacherous Maya underworld, known as Xibalba. First, coat the body entirely in that toxic cinnabar. Then, carefully fit her face with this delicate, stunning jade mosaic mask to preserve her identity for the gods. And finally, seal the sarcophagus deep within the temple so her soul is fully prepared for the journey. Now, what this reveals is this profound cosmic duality in the Maya world. Royal women absolutely were not silent bystanders, they were essential partners in rulership. See, she was buried directly next to Palenque's most famous ruler, King Pakal the Great. Now, Pakal represented the sun, depicted as falling into the underworld tree only to rise again.
The Red Queen's nearly identical burial rituals heavily suggest she was his moon, a feminine force providing cosmic balance and dynastic harmony. That physical proximity in death points to a massive, profound cosmic partnership in life. Let's fast forward a bit to 20th century Mexico. We're moving from the silent remnants of ancient royalty to a much more modern icon, another woman who used her broken body to rewrite history, defiantly broadcasting her physical and emotional agony to the entire world. Section 4. Frida Kahlo's defiant art, turning trauma into masterpieces. At just 18 years old, a truly horrific bus crash completely shattered Frida's spine, her pelvis, and her leg. In a weird, almost surreal twist of fate, the crash actually covered her broken body in sparkling gold powder that someone had been carrying on the bus. It changed her destiny in an instant. She had actually been studying to become a doctor, but this violent moment forced her into a full-body cast for months. And it was right there, in that agonizing stillness, that she picked up a paintbrush purely to survive. She essentially forged a new identity right out of her agony. She rigged up a canopy mirror above her bed, and she became her own first subject. Blending her disability, her communist politics, and a fierce Mexican pride, she completely rejected the polished art of her time. She unapologetically painted her bleeding body, her cracked spine, the raw medical trauma, all with this brutal honesty. And all the while, she's reclaiming her indigenous Mexican heritage, proudly wearing traditional Tijuana dresses, and remaining politically defiant, literally attending protests in a wheelchair. Frida endured more than 30 brutal surgeries over her lifetime. Her physical survival was just an absolutely relentless battle. But get this, when doctors told her she was way too sick to attend her very first solo exhibition in Mexico in 1953, she completely refused to listen. She literally had herself driven there in an ambulance and carried right into the gallery on a stretcher. She greeted her guests from her bed with tequila, laughter, and just as absolute refusal to let her physical limitations defeat her. Her final diary entry is incredibly piercing. She wrote, "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." She faced the end of her agonizing, yet incredibly vibrant life with the exact same raw honesty that defined her entire legacy. You know, Frida Kahlo always said she didn't paint dreams, she painted her reality. And in doing so, she turned her deep personal suffering into a massive global symbol of resistance and authenticity. So, to wrap up our explainer today, history really isn't a fairy tale. When you strip away all those romanticized myths, we're left with incredible human endurance. Whether it's confronting medieval squalor, surviving a cutthroat royal court, preparing for a treacherous ancient underworld, or pushing through devastating physical trauma, our history is defined by those who absolutely refused to break. So I'll leave you with this. When the romanticized myths of your own life are stripped away, what will your legacy of resilience be? Thanks for exploring this with me, guys. I hope this leaves you wanting to dig even deeper into our unfiltered past.